Hey, so welcome back to part two. This is going to actually look at starting to build the fundamental frameworks of this really simple CV web portfolio. So I've put this together, and you'll notice in place there's a little bit of junk data in there, but just to get an idea of the type of kind of look that we're going for and how we'll be finishing off. So we'll be coding this entire thing, and the idea is that off the basis of what we cover, you should be able to add additional components of your own. So we've got obviously a little bit of a heading here with an image, and there'll be some information about you. I'm using font awesome icons here with just a little bit of styling just to highlight main skills. Then there are some images here with corresponding little labels there, just of some projects that I have done. And then just again, just like a little bit of a CV section, and this could be styled in any way. You could put this underneath, but we're just going to go over this particular layout. How to use cards, which we'll learn more about in just a few moments, and obviously having a bit of a footer there with some links to some social media and some ways to contact me. So this is just a rough idea of, I guess, kind of where we're going, and we'll have our nav bar, which will jump to the right sections. So before we get really started with the coding, it's important to understand that we're using Bootstrap, and so you still have to understand HTML and CSS. Bootstrap isn't exactly a shortcut through that because you have to know how to apply it. But what it is a framework that allows you to make things quicker is the easiest way to describe it. So if you've had any experience of HTML and CSS, you know that you need to maybe put like a heading tag or a place for a paragraph or an image, and that fundamentally hasn't changed. But if we have a look at the Bootstrap website and we have a look at components, we can start to see some ready-made items that we can use. For example, a nav bar. All pages generally will have a navigation. And so if we take this one here as an example, copying this particular code directly underneath will actually allow us to create this by just pasting it straight into our code. And the way that that works is that when you use Bootstrap and you include the links that we started with at the beginning, you're including a certain amount of CSS styling and JavaScript and jQuery control, which allows things to work essentially. So just as an example, I showed you the carousel that I used, and a carousel is this kind of moving item, if you like, and there's lots of different styles. And the interactivity of being able to click this and it knowing to go to the next slide, that's all controlled with the JavaScript files that come as part and parcel. So if I wanted to use this and maybe just add my own words and my own picture, I can just copy this straight away. You can then add additional styling and change the format and font of things and the layout and the look, but it's just about understanding that it provides kind of like, blocks of code, if you like, that are already styled, and then you can just do stuff with them. So it's a very, very quick way of using and building websites. But more importantly, they're very much about this whole mobile first responsive websites. So I'm a big fan of Bootstrap. It's a great thing, and if you have a look on their expo, you'll see, for example, the Super Mario Odyssey page is built with Bootstrap, and ColorMind, which is a great place to try and find a color combination, something I definitely have used before, and so on. And different websites, you can click on them and you can have a little look and see what has been achieved by using the Bootstrap framework and using some of it's not really a framework, but the Bootstrap platform. So it's actually the most popular download kind of open source thing. So yeah, it's definitely worth using and getting used to using. So kind of moving on from that, let's actually start using it properly. So these components are things that exist already. That's this one here. So here's the Jumbotron, and I've used carousel here, and I've used cards here. But the main thing we really need to understand before we do much more is around the layout. Now, you may, if you've used CSS, understand about Flexbox and etc., but this has its own layout system. And if we go to the documentation and then we go to layout here, there's a load to read here, and you'll see me reference stuff here, and I'll try and explain as much as I can along. Of course, this isn't a full Bootstrap course, so there's again lots of those available already, but it will help us to understand how and you'll understand some of the terminology that I'll be using. And the easiest way to think of this is that everything in your page, everything I do, everything must be imagined in the concept of kind of rows and columns, and that allows us to shape and change the way that we can structure things on the page. And depending on the size of the web page, we might change. When a web page gets to a certain size, we might say, actually, do you know what? Can that particular section take up a little bit more or a little bit less space? And so this syntax you'll become really familiar with, or this kind of language, but it's just about understanding that. So if we just quickly look at this, you can probably clearly identify there's a couple of rows already. So this jumbotron, that's a row, and this text here, that's another row. Now I've then got a row here, but each of these is an individual column, and you can have a maximum of 12 columns on any page. So that's 12 columns from left to right. And if we imagine col 1 is one of those 12 columns, and at the moment these are set to each take up 1 column width, I believe. I'll have to double check. Now here we've got one row, but it's split into 2 columns. So each of these sections, the carousel on this side and the experience on this side, are separate columns, but they're within one row, and that allows me to deal with them as an individual. Again, here I've actually just got one row, and I have given each of these a column width of, I think, 4 or 5, and that means that the maximum I can have on one row is 12. So if each of these is 5, then I can have no more than 2 on a row. The next one automatically will just drop down to the next row. So you'll see me do this as we get started. I just think it's important to understand some of the background, because a lot of tutorials will show this and then you don't really understand why you're doing it. So hopefully that's helped a little bit. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to have the code here, and I mentioned before about the go live. So there's a particular extension that I use, which is let's see which extensions I already have. This would definitely help. So if I sort by installed, so it's the live server. And what live server allows you to do is I can actually hit go live down the bottom here, and it's going to open up my web page as it stands right now. Okay, and you can see I put some junk data in there anyway. Okay, so I'm going to close down the non-live one that I had, and we can see that this is just on a local IP. And this way I'll be able to see the changes happening as I actually do stuff on the side here. So let's just move that over a little bit, and let's move that one a bit. Right, so I'm just going to take this testing out, and I'm going to take this jumbotron out, and now we're actually going to start coding. So I'm going to start building the basic structure of everything, and we'll add styling as we go along. So the first thing I mentioned is I want to use a navigation bar, and so I'm just going to go to Bootstrap, and I'm going to get some base code, and I'm going to decide which navigation bar I want. So scrolling through these, I'm just going to expand this so I can get the full effect of what I want my nav bar to look like. I'm quite a fan of using this one here. I just really like this one. I normally tend to use this one. I might make a few changes to it as we go along. In fact, I will, but this is the base code that I want to use. Now, as you'll see in just a second, when I paste this in, it's actually going to instantly populate the top of my page. And I haven't really done anything yet. I've literally just pasted that in. So now I can come along and I can change stuff. So the first thing up here is this navbar brand, and I'm going to put my name in here. Okay. Now, you don't have to worry about changing all of these things, but if you have a little read through them, they kind of make sense. So this light is a color scheme that's built in with Bootstrap. It's how you have a kind of background of light and so on. But essentially, until you get comfortable, try not to change things in terms of the classes, because these relate to the CSS style sheet that you're linking to here. And so where it sees certain classes, it will say, okay, do that, etc. So in terms of what kind of headings we need, I'm going to link these to the areas that I'm going to be having on my page. So I'm not going to have multiple pages on this example because it's just a CV. It's not supposed to be having loads and loads of content. And so I'm going to have skills, projects, recent experience. Now, this one here that's disabled, that's just to demonstrate to you how you would be able to have one that currently isn't active. I'm going to take the disable part off of it because I want to have it active. And I'm also going to take off some of this styling here, okay, because I want to just make this a normal item that I can use. And I'm going to have my testimonials bit. testimonials. And I'll have to spell check that. So quick heads up if I haven't mentioned it on the previous video, but I am dyslexic. I therefore do misspelling mistakes, and sometimes I won't be able to recognise the word is spelt wrong. And so one, I apologise in advance, but also if like me you are dyslexic, don't think for a second it's something that puts you off being able to code, because it absolutely doesn't. It's never been a problem for me. I just sometimes do just need to check things a little bit often. So I'm copying and pasting straight away here, guys. Like, I'm not worrying about typing it all out, because why would I need to? It's the exact same code, and I'm going to put in a contact me part. Cool. So as we can see, this automatically drops down as the page gets smaller. But if I expand this out fully, then it will become full. So at the moment, this isn't going anywhere, this nav bar, but what we'll be doing is once we write the sections and we give them IDs, in the href part here, we will link the ID of the section that we're going to be coding. So that'll make sense as we come back to that, but let's just leave that for the moment and say that this bit's good to progress on to the next step. Cool. So the next bit we've got then is this Jumbotron. So my default is to put everything in a container, and a container class in Bootstrap just adds a little bit of natural margin to the left and the right. So a little shortcut, if you don't know it on Visual Studio, is if you type out a class and then hit enter, it will fill out the rest of the tag for you. Just makes life really easy. As well as having a class, I want to assign this particular container a name. So I'm going to call it Head Jumbo, and this is just going to allow me to give some styling to this specific section. So as I say, this isn't a HTML masterclass, but I just will point out the really important things like div tags. So a div tag separates something. Think of divides. It kind of divides off sections. And if we give classes and IDs to div tags, then we can apply CSS styling to everything from where the div tag opens to where the div tag closes. And so that's a really handy thing to be able to do. So now I've got my container, I'm actually going to put a Jumbotron in here. So I'm literally going to write Jumbotron, and again, that's a built-in class. And I didn't put my dot at the bottom, which is why it's not allowing me to autocomplete. But I'm also going to add a little extra class in here, which is text center. And as you probably guessed, that puts everything in my text boxes. Everything I put in here is going to be text centered. And now we're going to introduce this idea of rows and columns. So I want to create this effect where I've got my text on one side and my image on the other. And the easy way to do this is just to use rows and columns. So if we think about that, that means I have one row and then I have two columns. So my first column for my text, I'm going to say column small 8. And this means while it's a small screen size or above, it will take up 8 of the 12 available spaces. And then before I put anything more in, I'll do my other column, and this one's going to be column small 3. So you may be thinking, but that doesn't make 8. No, it doesn't. It means that there's a little bit of wiggle room for me to play with in terms of aligning stuff. So I've done that deliberately. You don't have to use all 12 spaces. Cool. So what I'm going to now do is there are some particular heading classes you can use with Bootstrap. To keep it simple, I'm going to avoid using too many Bootstrap things in every sense, because you can still just use a normal H1 tag. So I'm going to start by putting my name here. And then I'm going to just put a little bit in a H3 tag. And this one is going to say like technical instructor, I believe it says. So what you'll notice is that it's nicely centered, but it's not touched this area here on the side. And if we come up and we look in our inspector and we look at our elements, we can see that this one here, this column, is only taking up, I guess, this much of the space. There we go, found it. Is taking up SM8, and then this column, which currently is empty, is taking up the remaining 3, and then there's a little bit of space to the left. Cool. So what I want to do is I want to add another class in here, and this one's going to be called Align Self Center. And what this is going to do is, if we think about justifying content, which is how we can decide where things go along the horizontal axis, Align Self-Center says that we can put things on the vertical axis. Okay, so in terms of how we align it, and this is going to be important for when I bring my image in, because then I want to make sure that this text is nice and central. So if I just take that out for just a second, okay, then, well, you can't really see it while it's like this right now, but if it's sort of a bit wider and a bit longer, you can see it. But at the moment, actually, this is sat quite centrally, so that's fine. Cool. So then I'm going to be putting an image in here. Now I need to make sure that that image is inside of my folders, which I don't actually think it is right now. So just give me 2 seconds and I'm going to make sure the image is there for me to get. Okay, so all my images are now available that I use for the other websites. So I had to obviously make sure that I had access to them here. So first of all, I need to give the name of the folder, and then you'll see all of the images that are currently inside. And the one that I'm looking at is this AWS Soul. So this is just a little certification image that I have. So as you can see, it's really big right now, and that's fine. We're going to fix that in a couple of minutes with some CSS styling, but I'm going to change and put a little alt here. So I'll say AWS certificate. So I have to think about this as I'm writing it. Okay, cool. Certified. That's a good way to check the spelling. Anyways, what the alt does is if for any reason the image link is broken, it will show like a little hover message that will say exactly what is there, which is really important if, for example, that image that's broken is a button or an image that's representing where you would click to make something happen. So that's actually quite an important thing to kind of be aware of. So I've got my image in here, and then I've got my kind of name in here. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to start doing some CSS styling. So I'm going to open this page up fully, and I've got my style sheet open, and I'm going to split my screen. And this is really, really important in the early days of coding. In fact, it's important all the time so that you can see the difference of where you're looking and make sure you're getting the right thing. So I'm trying to get to this image, and this image is part of the head jumbo section. So when I have an ID, I reference the ID by using the hash symbol, and that allows me to reference an ID specifically. And inside the head jumbo, I actually want to get the image. Now, because an image is one of the elements from HTML, I don't have to put anything in front of it. I just write the image. So what this says is find this particular section and then go inside and look for any images associated. And I'm going to change the height and the width of this so that my image is a little bit more in line. So let's think about the height. Probably want to have it like 200 pixels in terms of the height, and I'm going to just set the width to auto because this image should kind of work out to be about the same dimensions anyway, and I think it's auto filled, so cool. And while I'm here, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to change the background color. So for head jumbo, I want to set the background color to that orange color. So I'm going to call background color, and it's orange red, I believe it's called. It's just a really bright orange. And I'm also going to, so color refers to the text color, and that can take a bit of time to get used to, is which one to use for text and font, etc. Okay, nice. So let's see where we're at right now. So I have colored the wrong bit. I shouldn't have done the head jumbo. So I'm going to take the background color back out of there, because what I actually want to do is the jumbotron. Now, I'm only going to have one jumbotron, so I can just call the class jumbotron. And for a class, we use the dot. Okay, so remember, it's the asterisk. It's not an asterisk. It's the hash symbol when it comes to using IDs, and then it's the dot when it comes to using classes. And this is where I'm going to make my background that orange red color. Okay, that's more like it. So what I will do though is I want to deal with the font a little bit more individually. So again, I'm going to use head jumbo, and I'm going to start by styling the H1. And for the H1, I'm going to say font size. And rem and em is measurements. And again, do a little bit further reading around that, guys, if it's something that you're not too familiar with. But I'm going to make the font, it needs to be a lot bigger than that. Let's go for 4 rem. No, that's far too big. Let's go for 3 rem. No, we'll go 4 rem. It'll kind of size up in a second. And then separately, I want to add individual styling to the head jumbotron H3. Now, it's really important that I say which H1 and which H3, because I'll be using multiple H1s and H3s in various places. And if I don't put the ID of where that particular section is, it will style every single H1 on the page that way. And obviously, that's not what I want it to do. I'm going to say the font size for this could probably be like 1.8 rem. I don't want it too big. I just want it to kind of sit underneath, maybe like 2.2. And it's really good to play around with this, guys, and kind of work out how you want it. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Cool. So as you can see, I've now got these items nicely kind of lined up, and I'm pretty happy with how it looks. So if we kind of look what it looks like full screen, nice. So that's the very first bit of our page done. So I'm going to stop the video there, and I will record the next bit and the next section in the next video. See you guys then.